right, so it's the last one. You've made it with me this far. The final video in the series about formative assessment and assessment marks and how this works. So this one's a little bit more on the philosophical kind of side of why are we doing this in terms of what's the point of all of this anyway. And again, remember that all this is sort of kind of part of a bigger picture about us trying to assess student performance as opposed to just give points for what they're doing. So why would we do this? Number one, the biggest idea is that shift towards communicating proficiency. Talking with parents, talking with students about what they know and understand and are able to do, not just giving them points for smiling or, turning in their papers or whatever it is. This also is a way for us to give them pretty quick and immediate feedback on performance. It's a lot easier once you get used to using this skill to be able to look at something and go, you know what, that's partially proficient. You're almost there. As was going, I think that's like an 82, maybe it's an 84. It's a little bit more clear-cut, and it does a much better job of communicating in terms of what actually is being represented on that piece of paper. And that's really the biggest idea behind why we're doing all this. So in terms of trying to make all of this work for both us and for students, there's a variety of kind of pieces that have to go into it. The first one's actually in some ways the hardest one I have on here. You as a teacher, you as a person, you have to know what it is that you're really looking for. And you have to be able to kind of split out the different components of what you're looking at. Neatness may be a part of it, but if you're really looking at paragraph structure, then you've got to be careful about how you're really assessing students. And so that's kind of the hardest part, is to step back and go, what do I really want them to be able to do? What are the specific skills? Like in science, sometimes it was about content, and sometimes it was more about specific sub-skill, or about being able to do scientific method, or about writing or organization if it was a poster. So you've got to kind of know what it is that you want. And then the second thing is, and this sometimes is hard for us as teachers, is that you have to take the time to share that vision explicitly with your students. Teach them what proficient looks like. Whatever you picture that to be, you've got to be the one that can clearly communicate that. And if you don't know what it is, there's no way a kid can know what it is. And so that's the first thing that you've got to be able to know what good is. And then that third part is how you share that vision. You can create rubrics, you can create a list, you can share a lot of exemplars, show kids what good looks like. Just like I've done it before. When a bunch of kids turn in papers, you can sort them into piles right away. These are the ones that are proficient. Wow, these couple are amazing. These couple are almost there. Kids can do the same thing. They know what proficiency feels like. It's just a matter of being very specific about, I'm grading you on proficiency on organization of your overall paper versus organization, or not organization, word choice or sentence fluency or something along those lines. You've got to be very specific about what exactly it is that you're looking for so the kids aren't blindsided. And that's the kind of the input on your part. But I promise you, as a teacher, and I found this myself, that when you identify your vision, when you're really clear with yourself about what you want, and then when you share that vision, the kids are not only willing to meet that, they're willing to exceed that and to really show you more than you ever even thought possible. I promise it's worth it, although I know it is a big time investment. This is what I was kind of saying earlier. Make sure that when you're scoring kids, that one mark that you give only represents one skill. That you're not having one mark that's sort of an overall. I know I was guilty of this. A kid would turn in a lab paper and you'd have to put a 90 on it. But part of that was about the writing, part of it was about the scientific method, part of it was about their graphs. It was really hard to kind of pull all that stuff together. And now with this kind of formative marks that we're doing, is I would give them one score for their writing, a separate score to assess their graphs and data table, and a third score to assess their experiment, whatever they'd set up. And so you've got to be really clear to separate those skills out, because you're going to really assess them differently. Furthermore, kids need that opportunity to be able to get some feedback. They need to know where they stand. You can either give them an opportunity to one-on-one with you. A lot of times they can get this opportunity with each other. Kids are pretty brutal with one another. If you give them a chance to be, they'll really call each other on their crap. So give them that opportunity to take a look at it and go, yeah, is this really where I think it is? Or, oh my gosh, I'm way off the mark, or I didn't understand what I was trying to do. And that last part, we talked about feedback a lot last year. Make sure that you're giving really specific feedback, like you're really good on your word choice, but your sentences don't flow together, or whatever the case may be, or you've done the math right, but you haven't shown me all your work. I really need to see that explanation, or you're missing a couple of steps. Very specific things about how to let them meet that target, just a little bit up and a little bit to the left, right, and you'll get that target. So specific feedback, not just, yeah, you're kind of close. Overall, my big kind of picture philosophy in terms of what my assignment marks were, and you guys need to have this conversation what you want them to be. But for me, a 4 or above proficient was that wow product. You know it when you see it, like, wow, I wish I'd done that. And other kids do too. Dang, I wish I'd turned that paper in. A 3, proficient, means I got it. I can do the simple stuff. I can do the harder stuff. Yeah, I pretty much can do what it is that you want me to do. I may not be super sophisticated or go above and beyond, but I can do it. A 2 means I'm getting there. I need some help. I'm starting to get there, but yeah, I'm still a little fuzzy on maybe some of the harder things. A 1 for me typically was I'm new. They're below proficient. It's a brand new process for them. They're even struggling on recognizing the words to some extent. This basic philosophy is really easy to communicate with kids and parents. And this is really, really the short version, but it's kind of the basis for it. You know, if a kid can look and go, yeah, I get it. I get all of it. That's probably a 3. But there's obviously more to this, and it doesn't feel like enough to me, so this next slide's got a lot of text. I apologize. It's easier to go in depth, or it was for me to go into a little bit more depth in terms of what this is. So you may want to hit pause and come back to this in a little bit. But this is simply spelling it out. Like, what's the difference between a 3, which is I get it, and a 4, which is above and beyond? And for me in science and in my context, it was typically that ability to really explain something, to really go in depth, to use a lot of supporting detail, that they weren't just parroting stuff back to me. They really got it in a deeper way than a kid that just kind of gets it. And you kind of probably know what this feels like with students in your area. Math can be a little bit tricky, some of these subdivisions, but you probably know what that feels like. Like a 2.5. A 2.5 is a little bit below proficient, right? They're almost there, man. There's just a couple of things they're making some mistakes at. You just really want to nudge them that extra little bit. Like, now, in order to be proficient, you really have to do this too. That's just below that, partially proficient. You know, 1.5, I didn't get a lot of those, but that was usually where a kid was just new. Maybe they could get some of those simple ones right, but they definitely were way down there. So it's just a way to be able to kind of split those out a little bit more. And the kids really understood this. Most of my students, once they understood what a 3, 3.5, and a 4 were, that's where they were aiming at. For most kids, a 2.5 was like, not right there. They were this close, and they weren't usually satisfied with being almost there. They wanted to get it. So, like I said, having this vision and being able to communicate it in a general sense, and then in a more specific sense, is important. Like, okay, you're answering this question about genetics, but I need you to use some specific details about what genetics means. That's how you bump it up. That's that specific feedback to apply this general idea to a specific assignment. Moving on a little bit in terms of how do these convert into grades. That assignment marks thing that you did is a grade converter in a sense. It's a way of assigning point values to proficiency scores. It's not perfect, not at all, and there's definitely room for flexibility and discussion on your part over what these percent earns are going to be. But when I looked at the numbers overall, I started with the philosophy that if a kid was proficient, they should probably earn a B. To me, that's like that kind of minimum, yeah, you got it. You know, it's not a high B, it's an 82, but yeah, you know, you got it. To really get a kid to get an A, they really had to be able to go a lot more in depth than to be reaching for those 3.5s and those 4s, to give me some supporting details, some extra stuff, or to really do some in-depth research. I made a 4 pretty hard to get. A kid had to go beyond what I was doing in class to get a 4. A typical C student, you know, what are you going to get a C? A C means that kind of across the board, you're at that almost there phase. You're at that 2.5. You know, you got the simple stuff, you're developing understanding of the harder stuff, you're maybe struggling on a little bit of the finer points, but you're almost there. To me, that felt like a C. And a D was pretty easy to get, really. You know, a D in my class, you know, you can show me that you got the simple stuff, and you're starting to get, you know, maybe a little bit of the harder stuff. But for the most part, you can kind of walk in and do the easy stuff. That's a D. So that was kind of my philosophy in terms of how those are. And I ran a bunch of numbers. Those percentages over there on the right seemed to work, that when I averaged a bunch of them together, that matched that philosophy. So again, I know those numbers look a little awkward. They don't seem to match our kind of typical 10% scale, but it really does work to have our letter grades then represent those levels of proficiency. Proficiency is a B, above and beyond is an A, almost proficient is a C. And that's kind of the philosophy that I went into on assigning those. Oh, by the way, I'm going to go back to this real quick. There's a difference between assignment marks and a grading scale. And some of you have asked me this actually before, even last year. Assignment marks like this is a way for us to enter an assignment mark, like a 4, a 3, a 2, or 1, and have the computer calculate a percent that goes along with it. A grading scale does the exact opposite. Grading scale takes a bunch of points and then converts a bunch of points into a percentage grade that's tied to a letter grade. So what we would do before is put up a bunch of points, and they'd get 85 points out of 100. A grading scale would allow then the computer to go, oh, 85% out of 100, that's a B. So assignment marks and grading skills are very, very similar, and there's a lot of overlap between them. But assignment marks is more what we want to do philosophically than a grading scale. So sorry if that just confused you. Blah, blah, blah. Hit rewind. Fast forward. Anyway. How to get more out of your kids using the system. Number one, really critical, you have to be explicit. You have to teach the kids what this proficiency scale means. What is an A, advanced proficiency? What's a 4? What's a 3? What's a 2? And then teach them how to use that so that they can self-assess. And then, of course, you have to have those really clear expectations inside yourself. What are the different things I'm assessing? Be very clear that I'm going to assess you on paragraph structure, not the content or the subject choice or the words that you choose, but the organization of it. Whatever it is, you have to very clearly communicate that to your students. Students need a lot of opportunities, especially at first, to be able to demonstrate the proficiency on themselves and even with each other, so that they can kind of figure out how this scale works. What does it really feel like? Once they get it, they start taking off, and it's pretty fast. But keep in mind that they can either demonstrate proficiency on a single assignment by, say, revising and resubmitting it. It's close. It was a 2.5. Just redo a couple of things with organization, and then they can bump it up to a 3. Or sometimes you may want them to do it over a course of time, several different assignments. Like you're going to look at their paragraph organization in week 1, and then a different assignment, paragraph organization in week 3, and a different assignment, paragraph organization on week 5. It doesn't have to be necessarily one assignment and resubmit. It can be a couple. But keep in mind that however you choose to do it, one assignment or several, that you never want to hold kids accountable or hold them harmful for those early attempts. They need to understand and trust you that taking a risk isn't going to hurt them. That those early attempts, even if they're partially proficient or they're just being introduced to it, even if you record that grade's going to go away. They've got a chance to make it proficient or to make it advanced or whatever it is that they want. And that will allow them to take those risks and really develop those skills that you want them to take. So it's important to understand how you're entering those grades so that you don't hurt them simply because on an early paper they got a 2 on it. That early paper needs to go away and be replaced by a later paper's grade, or they need a chance to revise and resubmit that earlier paper in a better, more proficient way. Overall, by the way, there's a couple of different ways that you can enter these grades, and here you can kind of see an example from one of my grade books. It's important that within a single standard, you don't average within a single standard. Like I said, a week 2 paragraph organization, a week 4 paragraph, and a week 6 paragraph organization, you would not average those together. You would use the last best score. So by the end of 6 weeks or the end of 10 weeks, they're operating at a 3. You don't want those earlier scores to count them. You have to count those last scores, those 3s that actually show what they can do now at the end of their growth. You can then keep those earlier scores by putting them in a separate folder if you want to keep record of their growth. For example, I have a folder here called Formative Points. Those are like earlier assignments. And you can see I checked this box here that says Exclude from Grading. And again, that's in the Edit Categories section. So you can have all of those things recorded and show literally that, oh yeah, look, week 2 you're at a 1.5. Those are all still there and visible, but they don't actually get counted in the overall average. And that's a pretty good way to do that. And what I would do is then for their mastery standards, I would simply enter that last greatest best one. So yes, at the end of week 10, here's your best score in paragraph organization is going to go in that mastery standards. All the other previous attempts go in formative. This last best attempt now goes under mastery. Or you don't even have to do that. You can just keep editing a grade and keep kind of writing over a previous score if that's what you want to do. Last thing, I guess, philosophically here, keep in mind that a semester grade or a quarter grade does actually average several different standards. So you're going to average together, in the end, their mastery standards on a bunch of different things, and you're going to get an overall picture of how they're doing in biology or how they're doing in English 9. But within a single standard, you never average. Within a single standard, you count the best one or the most indicative one of their skills. But at the end of a semester, that overall picture is indeed an average, and that's why we have to use those assignment marks, and then we have that kind of percentage grade that it equivalates to. So there you go. That's a little bit more into the philosophy of why we do this kind of stuff. I hope it kind of clarified some things. It probably brought up more questions, but this is a great time for you guys to have those conversations with each other about what you want this to look like. So there you go. I hope you weren't too bored. Hope you enjoyed it a little bit, and I hope to see you guys soon. Talk to you later. Bye.